Dar al-Arqam and the first migration to Abyssinia, Ethiopia. As the persecution of the early Muslims worsened, the Prophet Muhammad remained firm in his mission. He continued preaching Islam openly, filled with devotion and wisdom, but he was also deeply aware of the danger his followers faced. To protect them and to teach Islam in safety, he chose a secret meeting place, Dar al-Arqam, a house near the base of Mount as-Safa, during the 5th year of prophethood. There, new converts were quietly taught the Quran and the core teachings of Islam, away from the prying eyes of the hostile Quraysh. But even as the teachings spread in secret, the situation in Mecca became unbearable. What began as scattered harassment in the 4th year had grown into systematic and daily torture by the 5th. The Quraysh unleashed every form of cruelty upon those who believed in Allah. Faced with this escalating crisis, the Muslims began looking for a way out. It was around this time that Surah Al-Kahf, the cave, was revealed. In it, Allah told the story of the young men who fled persecution for their faith and sought refuge in a cave, where Allah protected them. And when you withdraw from them and from that which they worship besides Allah, retreat to the cave. Your Lord will spread for you of His mercy and make easy for you your affair.
Quran 18 e 16.
The chapter contained powerful lessons, that those who stand firm in belief may need to flee for their safety, and that Allah protects His servants even in the darkest times. Also revealed during this critical time was Surah Az-Zumar, the crowds, which included a message of hope and a gentle push toward migration. Good is the reward for those who do good in this world. And Allah's earth is spacious. Only those who are patient will be given their reward without account.
Quran 39, 10.
These verses confirmed what the Prophet already knew, that the time had come to seek refuge elsewhere. He looked to Abyssinia, Ethiopia, where the king, Negus, an-Najashi, was known for his justice and kindness. The Prophet granted permission to a small group of his followers to migrate, knowing that in the land of the fair Christian king, they would be safe from the cruelty of the Quraysh. This moment marked the first migration, Hijra, in Islam, a brave step toward freedom and protection for the oppressed believers, and the beginning of Islam's journey beyond Mecca. The first migration to Abyssinia and the stunning recitation in the sanctuary. In Rajab of the 5th year of prophethood, a small but courageous group of early Muslims made history. They became the first emigrants in Islam. 12 men and 4 women, including Uthman bin Affan and his wife Ruqayya, the Prophet's daughter, slipped out of Mecca in the darkness of night. Their mission was simple: seek freedom to worship Allah in peace. The Prophet Muhammad, deeply moved by their sacrifice, said, "They are the first people to migrate in the cause of Allah after Abraham and Lot." Carrying their faith in secret, they made their way to the port of Shweba, where 2 ships were bound for Abyssinia, Ethiopia, a land ruled by a just Christian king, Negus, an-Najashi. Though the Quraysh learned of their escape and sent men to stop them, the believers had already set sail, safe from their oppressors. When they arrived in Abyssinia, they were welcomed with warmth, kindness, and protection. That same year, during Ramadan, something remarkable happened in the holy sanctuary, Al-Masjid al-Haram. The Prophet, standing among a crowd of Quraysh leaders and tribesmen, began to recite Surah An-Najm, chapter 53, the Star. It was a moment charged with divine power. The Quraysh had grown used to mocking and shouting over the Quran's words, trying to drown out its message. Do not listen to this Quran, and make noise during its recitation so that you may overcome. Quran 41:26. But this time, they were silent. The verses descended like thunder, powerful, poetic, and undeniable. Every word struck their hearts. They were entranced, stunned into stillness. The arrogance melted from their faces. As the Prophet reached the climactic command, "So fall in prostration to Allah and worship Him." Quran 53:62. They all fell to the ground in unplanned, spontaneous prostration, Muslims and idolaters alike. It was a moment of truth piercing through years of disbelief. The power of revelation had gripped their souls, even if only for a moment. Ashamed and confused by their reaction, the polytheists who hadn't been present demanded an explanation. In a desperate attempt to save face, the Quraysh spread false rumors, claiming the Prophet had praised their idols or sought their intercession. This, of course, was a complete fabrication, typical of the lies and deceit they often used to discredit Islam. But the reality remained. For a few unforgettable seconds, even the most hardened of hearts had bowed to the word of Allah. The second migration to Abyssinia and Jafar's speech before the king. The stunning prostration of the Quraysh in the sanctuary caused a wave of confusion, not just in Mecca, but all the way across the Red Sea in Abyssinia, Ethiopia. The Muslim emigrants, already in exile there, received false news. Quraysh has accepted Islam. Hope blossomed in their hearts. Thinking it safe to return, they journeyed home. But reality struck hard. When they were just an hour's distance from Mecca, they discovered the truth. The Quraysh were still fiercely opposed to Islam. Some emigrants turned back at once. Others quietly slipped into the city. A few entered openly, but only under the protection of powerful local allies. Yet the Quraysh were furious. Word had reached them that the Muslims had been honored and protected in Abyssinia, and this humiliation drove them into a deeper rage. They tightened their grip and escalated their violence. The Prophet Bu, seeing the renewed danger, granted permission for a second migration. This time, it wasn't a quiet escape. The Quraysh were vigilant, watching every move, determined to stop anyone from fleeing. Despite the risk, the believers moved swiftly, organizing their departure before the Quraysh could stop them. 83 men and 19 women made the journey, a historic wave of migration, filled with courage and desperation. But the Quraysh weren't done. Determined to snatch back the Muslims, they dispatched two of their most cunning envoys, Amr bin Alaz and Abdullah bin Abi Rabi'a, both of whom had not yet accepted Islam. Armed with lavish gifts for the Abyssinian king and his clergy, they arrived with a mission: convince the king to hand over the Muslims. The king of Abyssinia, Negus, a Najashi, was a fair and wise ruler. He summoned the Muslims and gave them a chance to speak for themselves. Jafar bin Abi Talib, cousin of the Prophet Bu, stood before the king, calm, composed, and unwavering in truth. He said, "O king, we were a people lost in ignorance. We worshipped idols, ate carrion, behaved shamelessly. We severed family ties, mistreated neighbors, and the strong among us devoured the weak. Then Allah raised a man from among us, whose honesty, trustworthiness, and purity we knew. He called us to worship one God alone, to speak truth, honor our trusts, to respect our kin and neighbors, to pray, to fast, to give in charity. For this, our people turned against us. They tortured us, trying to drag us back to idol worship. So we fled here to your land, O king, seeking justice and protection from oppression." The words rang out in the royal court, humble, yet full of dignity. The atmosphere was tense, the truth hanging heavy in the air. What happened next? We'll continue if you like. Would you like the continuation of the courtroom exchange between Jafar and Negus, including his response and the Quraysh's next move? The court of Negus and Quraysh's defeat. The Abyssinian king was moved. The moment Jafar bin Abi Talib finished speaking about Islam, the court fell silent, stunned by the clarity, truth, and dignity of his words. The king, deeply touched, requested Jafar to recite something from the revelation of Allah. Jafar began reciting verses from Surah Maryam, the story of John and Jesus, the purity of Mary, the miraculous birth, and the light of divine truth shining through it all. The verses flowed over the court like a wave of light. Tears rolled down the cheeks of the king and his bishops, flowing freely, even soaking their beards. The hall of Negus had never heard such words before. Then the king declared, "These words and those revealed to Jesus come from the same lamp of light." He turned to the envoys of Quraysh, now silent and humiliated. "I will never hand these people over to you," he said. "They are safe in my land, free to worship their Lord as they please." The Quraysh envoys were not done. The next day, they returned with a fresh accusation, that the Muslims blasphemed Jesus. Once again, the Muslims were summoned. Jafar stood calmly, with truth on his tongue and no fear in his heart. "We say about Jesus what our prophet taught us. He is the servant of Allah, his messenger. His spirit and his word, breathed into Mary." The king rose from his throne. "Even so do we believe," he exclaimed. "Blessed are you, and blessed is your prophet." The court erupted, not in applause, but in anger from some of the bishops. But the king silenced them with a command. You may rage, but Jesus is no more than what Jafar has said. From that moment onward, the Muslim refugees lived in peace in Abyssinia, protected by the just ruler, Negus. Their faith was safe, and for the first time in years, they breathed freely. Quraysh turns desperate. Quraysh had failed. Their plot to retrieve the Muslims from Abyssinia had collapsed. Their anger deepened. Frustrated, they turned their eyes back to Mecca, and to one target, Muhammad. But one man still stood in their way, Abu Talib, the Prophet's noble uncle. So they tried again. Quraysh's leaders came to Abu Talib, pressuring him to silence his nephew. Warn him, they said. If he doesn't stop, your house will face our wrath. Abu Talib was torn, caught between his loyalty to his tribe and his love for his nephew. He sent for the Prophet and shared the threat, saying, Spare me and spare yourself. Don't put more on me than I can bear. The Prophet stood quietly. Then he replied with calm conviction. O my uncle, by Allah, even if they put the sun in my right hand, and the moon in my left, telling me to abandon this path, I would never abandon it, until Allah gives it victory, or I die in the effort. He turned to leave, but Abu Talib's heart could not let him go. Come back, my nephew. When the Prophet turned back, Abu Talib looked at him with pride, and said, Go forth and say what you wish. By Allah, I will never give you up. And with that, the Prophet's shield remained strong, not in swords or armies, but in the love and protection of one man standing between him and the storm. The failed bargain and rising threats. When all efforts to suppress the Prophet had failed, persuasion, slander, threats, and exile, Quraysh devised a new, shameful proposal. A delegation approached Abu Talib with what they framed as a fair trade. They said, Give us Muhammad and take Amara bin al-Walid in return, a strong young man. A simple exchange. Just man for man. Abu Talib's face darkened with disbelief. By Allah! What an unjust bargain! You ask me to raise your son while you kill mine? This is unthinkable. Even Al-Mut'im bin Adi, one of the delegates, intervened to say, We've been fair. We only mean to remove a source of your trouble. But Abu Talib was unwavering. He dismissed their offer outright, sending them away, his loyalty to his nephew unshaken. Though the historical records do not specify exactly when these meetings occurred, most accounts suggest they took place around the 6th year of prophethood, likely in close succession. The plot to kill the Prophet. With their schemes failing one after another, Quraysh grew desperate. They turned to their last resort, assassination. The plan was terrifying. Kill Muhammad, silence the call, and end the movement before it grew any further. They escalated their torture of the believers, tightening their grip, desperate to break the spirit of Islam. But this plan backfired in the most unexpected way. It was during this boiling point of violence that two powerful and fearless men embraced Islam. Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib, the Prophet's brave uncle. Umar bin al-Khattab, the feared warrior of Quraysh. Their conversion shook Mecca and breathed new strength into the persecuted Muslims. The curse of Utaiba bin Abi Lahab. One day, Utaiba bin Abi Lahab, the arrogant son of Abu Lahab, approached the Prophet in a show of defiance. I disbelieve in, by the star when it descends, Surah An-Najm. He sneered. And in, then he, Gabriel, approached and came closer. I reject all of your Quran. With rage in his heart, he tore the Prophet's garment, and in an act of ultimate disrespect, spat toward his face, but his spit missed. The Prophet remained silent, then raised his hands and made a chilling supplication. O Allah! Set one of your dogs upon him. Days later, Utaiba set out with a Quraysh caravan toward Syria. They stopped one night at Az-Zarqa, setting up camp. Suddenly, a lion emerged from the shadows, fierce and silent. Fear gripped Utaiba. Woe to me! This is what Muhammad warned of. I'm doomed. Even from Mecca, he's killed me in Syria. His dread became reality. The lion leapt into the group, passed by all others, and snatched Utaiba alone. With a terrifying roar, it crushed his head, just as the Prophet had prayed. The Quraysh, stunned and horrified, knew then, even in faraway lands, Allah's protection surrounded Muhammad, and his justice was near. Would you like the next part, where the social boycott of Banu Hashim begins and the Muslims endure the valley of Abu Talib?